What's up? This is the other map, and this is our video about Cumbia, an extremely popular and quickly spreading musical genre with its roots in Caribbean Colombia. Cumbia is known for its adaptability and has made itself at home throughout Latin America, from Mexico to Argentina to Queens to Peru. But its origin story, which is mostly what we'll be discussing, is cool in itself. As a disclaimer, Cumbia is a big topic, and while I've done my best to cover it, this obviously does not tell the whole story of every subgenre of Cumbia. If your scene got left out, tell us about it in the comments. Also, as always, please comment if we got anything wrong as far as the info in the video, and be sure to check the comment section to see if there have been corrections. Anyway, you could argue that most modern music comes from the Caribbean, although that narrative is a complicated one. For example, genres like reggae and ska are extremely popular, but I would say that Jamaica's most important contribution to world music related to the way reggae DJs would play records. This is because one of the building blocks of hip-hop, the backspin, comes directly from Jamaican DJ techniques, the proof being that DJ Kool Herc, almost universally considered the key innovator of hip-hop, was a Jamaican immigrant living in New York. In addition, looping, of which the backspin is a close ancestor, is the basis of most music production software today. Another musical hotbed would be New Orleans, on the Caribbean coast of the United States. It's safe to say that the most important musical export from the city would be jazz, which took over the world in the 1920s and 30s. However, that genre is probably most relevant today in that one of its subgenres, jump blues, turned into rock and roll with the addition of an electric guitar. Rock and roll, of course, evolved into the pop music played in some form worldwide today. Then there was the huge influence of Cuban mambo, which was popular in the 1940s United States and for a while after that in West Africa. Additionally, the Cuban tresillo, otherwise known as the Spanish tinge, was a little known but very present ingredient in the birth of jazz. And then there's salsa, merengue, and reggaeton, which have decidedly Caribbean ancestry, and Trinidad's music, which famously utilizes the iconic steel drum. That's not even getting into homegrown regional genres. I mean, it goes deep. This same region, the laboratory of music that is the Caribbean Sea, is also where the genre we're here to talk about was born. This rhythm is currently spreading around the globe like wildfire, and is already one of the most popular musical styles in the world. Huge in Latin America and having made inroads into Europe and the mainstream United States, this music is cumbia, a genre with a specific rhythm like the one playing in the background right now. This beat is often sped up for more club-friendly tunes and slowed down for more vibey beatscapes, but if you hear this rhythm in the background, it's cumbia. Cumbia was originally completely instrumental, and traditionally involved a dance of flirtation, wherein the woman holds a candle and pretends to avoid the approaches of the man who tries to put a hat on her head. But things have evolved a lot. Modern cumbia often involves vocals, and how you dance is largely dictated by the speed of the music, which varies by the regional interpretation of the rhythm. One traditional cumbia band, Cumbiamba, consisted of 3 drummers, a percussionist, and someone playing a clarinet-like reed instrument, known as the caña de millo. Another traditional Colombian group, Conjunto de Gaitas, uses 2 drummers, a percussionist, and 2 flutes. Today, it's sort of anything goes. Accordions? Check. Electric guitars? Check. Synths? Why not? Drum machines? I mean, if you can make it work, sure. Despite all the modern bells and whistles involved in cumbia, the rhythm itself hasn't strayed from its origin. It has a heritage of both indigenous Colombian and African roots. And because the music on top of that rhythm is played these days with instruments from across the globe, it is truly a music of modern Latin America. The point of origin for cumbia is the Caribbean coast of Colombia. The region has 2 major cities, the biggest being Barranquilla, which 2 separate travel guides claimed is only worth visiting for its Carnival celebration, which apparently gets pretty wild. It's sort of hard to believe that the city Shakira's from is boring, but yeah. In any case, the cultural capital of Colombia's Caribbean coast is the region's other major city, Cartagena, a city that by all accounts is magical and has great food. It also sits on a bunch of islands and has nice beaches, vacation material for sure. Since cumbia is partly an indigenous music, it's worth going back a bit in the area's history to tell the story of the region's first inhabitants. a story that starts 6,000 years ago, around 4000 BCE. It was around this time that one of the first known societies in the Americas, and the first known society in Colombia, was founded in the Cartagena area. Known today as the Puerto Hormiga culture, after the archaeological site where the culture's remains were found, they stuck around due to the mild climate and an abundance of wildlife, and left behind some of the oldest ceramic artifacts in the Americas. The Mansu culture, which appears to have inherited practices from the Puerto Hormiga peoples, brought agriculture and other advancements to the Cartagena area at around 3000 BCE. One of the most advanced societies in the Americas at the time, the Mansu inhabited a grip of what are now Cartagena suburbs until 1000 BCE. At the time of Spanish contact, the land that makes up the actual city of Cartagena today was inhabited by subtribes of the Carib culture. Although this history has been challenged by recent research, it's pretty well accepted that members of the Carib culture, who already controlled much of South America's Caribbean coast, were making their way up the Lesser Antilles into Arawak territory when the Spanish arrived. If Europeans hadn't showed up when they did, Caribs might have controlled the entire Caribbean eventually, but the Europeans did show up and stop this indigenous conflict with the resulting smallpox pandemic. Spanish colonists took over the Carib settlements on the mainland and renamed the city Cartagena in the year 1533. The city was a constant target for pirates, including the notorious Sir Francis Drake, so much so that massive fortifications were eventually built as a safeguard. You can still visit this iconic complex of forts today, and it made the city impenetrable. The construction also took almost 200 years to build and cost an absurd amount of Spanish coin to finance. And, in a plot twist, the forts were eventually used against the Spanish during the wars for Colombian independence in the 1810s. The city held out against Spain's naval power for 6 months. This war cost Cartagena a lot, however, and caused an exodus, which fed other Colombian cities such as Barranquilla. Cartagena would only regain the population it had in 1811 around 1900, which is a long time. It's worth noting that from 1819 to 1831, Colombia had a much larger territory, as in it would have been the 8th largest country in the world today. This huge nation is known to historians as Gran Colombia, although its name was just Colombia, and consisted of Ecuador, Panama, Venezuela, and today's Colombia, as well as parts of Peru, Brazil, and Guyana. But it would continually lose territory until modern Colombia's borders were solidified in 1903, after the United States under Teddy Roosevelt stole Panama in a move that was exceptionally shady. Before we get back to Cumbia, it's worth noting the demographics of Colombia's Caribbean coast. Most big Colombian cities are heavily mestizo, or of mixed European and indigenous blood, while the inner provinces, which stretch into the Amazon, are largely indigenous. The coast is a little different, as during the colonial era, Colombia had a role in the tragedy that was the transatlantic slave trade, meaning there has been a sizable African population in the region for hundreds of years. Africa's drumming traditions are, of course, heavy, and it was this musical culture that fused with indigenous Colombian musical traditions and evolved into the music that would become cumbia. This fusion would happen in the wetlands of the Magdalena River Valley, upriver from Barranquilla. This region has a large population of Zombo peoples, Zombo being a mix of African and indigenous Colombian blood. When slaves in the Magdalena River Valley escaped, they would form communities known as palenques that allied with, and sometimes fused with, native tribes. This cohabitation and the intermarriage that resulted was common throughout the New World, but in this case the Africans allied specifically with the Chimila and Pocabui peoples. The Africans introduced their drum-making techniques to the indigenous tribes, and supposedly things kind of took off from there. The information I have on the Lower Magdalena River region comes from the book Magdalena, River of Dreams by Wade Davis, which makes the area sound like the sort of musicologist's heaven, a primordial ooze of rhythms and song structures spreading out throughout the watershed, with musical centers, including the city of El Banco, playing off each other and creating new genres. This Zombo-heavy region sounds very, very cool. The book itself focuses on the entire Magdalena as it flows between Colombia's V-shaped mountains, from the country's interior to the coast, and is well worth a read. It's also well worth noting that this region has ties to legendary Colombian author Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who lived in the town of Sucre here and was born in the not that distant town of Aracataca, closer to the Caribbean coast. Aracataca is well known to be the inspiration for the city of Macondo in the author's famous book 100 Years of Solitude, and the city of Mompox, also in the region, is where a 1987 adaptation of another Marquez book was filmed. In any case, the heavy musical culture of the Magdalena River Valley is obvious from the laws passed by the authorities, who in 1623 ordered all drums to be gathered and destroyed, but in 1781 officially gave up due to the impossibility of stopping the music. And it was this unrestrainable sonic culture that has birthed multiple genres, including tambora, one of the more popular in the region today. The Magdalena River reaches the sea in Barranquilla, and supposedly new genres created in the river valley make their way down the Magdalena and are celebrated in Barranquilla's Carnival, which is a big celebration and is supposed to be insane. And so it was with the genre we're here to talk about, cumbia. Now, cumbia is still a heavy presence in the Barranquilla Carnival celebrations, as are many other rhythms from the Magdalena River Valley. But in this part of Colombia, as in other musical hotbeds like New Orleans, there are a number of regional musical genres that have had a hard time making it out of their respective neighborhoods. One example in Caribbean Colombia would be champeta, which is a popular genre in the region today. While it may still catch on elsewhere, it remains a largely local music. So what made cumbia different as far as achieving international success? The difference is that cumbia got what you could call a glow-up in the 1930s. The story is complicated, but basically the spark was Cuban music coming to coastal Colombia and becoming very, very popular. Cuban musicians at the time played in huge orchestras, and Colombian orchestras were formed to play that music for coastal Colombian radio stations, which at the time ran live music on the airwaves. The Colombian Cuban-style orchestras then started playing cumbia arrangements, and boom, the music that was once played by small bands in the Magdalena River Valley became arranged for orchestras and transmitted throughout Barranquilla, Cartagena, and the inland Colombian capital of Bogotá. This transformation made for a killer new musical genre, but it also had the effect of whitewashing cumbia. The specific instruments that originally played the music, which were derived from Zombo, indigenous Colombian, and African musical traditions, were left out of the new cumbia orchestras, and a previous association between cumbia and black Colombian culture slowly faded. As sad as this cycle may be, that dynamic definitely played a role in giving cumbia a bigger stage and prepping it for its global takeover. Big band cumbia became the rage throughout Colombia in the 1940s, and that era is known as the Golden Age of cumbia. Famous orchestras led by Lucho Bermudez and Pacho Galan were highly in demand, and these band leaders would also tour internationally. And one of the radio station orchestras, known as Orquestra Emisora Fuentes, began to cut records in Cartagena, kickstarting the legendary Colombian record label Discos Fuentes, which would spread big band cumbia via old 78 RPM records. The cumbia orchestra era died down in the late 1950s, when bands began to reduce in size. This simplification of personnel led to simplified arrangements, obviously, and this more stripped-down cumbia became a major musical export to the rest of Latin America, which found it more palatable than the orchestral strain of the music. Now, I'm not sure exactly why the big band era of cumbia faded out, but it could have been that musicians were busy. In the United States, 1920s big bands thinned out because musicians were drafted for World War II. In the case of cumbia, musicians may have been drawn into, or more likely would have been running from, the violence that began in Colombia in the 1940s. After the 1946 presidential election, which saw Colombia's Conservative Party candidate win despite receiving around 42% of the vote, Colombian politics were tense. 2 years later, the Liberal Party frontrunner in the upcoming election was assassinated in Bogotá, and things boiled over. The civil war began in Colombia, one that would become known as La Violencia. This conflict killed at least 200,000 people and displaced millions, with the Conservative Party using the police and the army to fight militias associated with the Liberal and Communist parties. La Violencia was an especially gruesome conflict, let's just leave it at that, and its aftermath would result eventually in the formation of the FARC, which descends from liberal and Communist Party militias who refused the ceasefires that ended La Violencia. We're not going to pretend to fully understand the Colombian conflict of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, but the FARC was one of the actors in a three-pronged war that plagued Colombia for just over 60 years, where they fought both the Colombian government and right-wing paramilitaries. Colombians had it very, very bad for a long time, especially in the countryside where the ultra-powerful Colombian cartels grew coca. Those cartels generated massive profits from cocaine consumption, mostly in the United States, and would team up with the various militias. To top it off, as part of the war on drugs, the U.S. government was supplying the Colombian army with weapons. There is, however, a bright spot to all this. It ended. Much like the conflict in Northern Ireland, the fight with the FARC has had, so far, a relatively happy ending, with the peace deal that was made in 2016 holding up pretty well. One outcome of this is that you can now safely visit Colombia. After all, it's one of the world's most biodiverse countries, has a colorful overall culture, and has vibrant cities like Medellin and Cartagena to check out. Don't get it twisted, the Colombia of La Violencia and the FARC conflict is not the Colombia of today, and anyone that visits the country will definitely be rewarded. Even during the conflict, however, the Colombian recording industry continued to document the growth of cumbia. Tourists may have largely avoided Colombia for over half a century due to its perceived and often real danger, but because of the international distribution of record labels like Discos Fuentes and the Colombian bands that have been touring Latin America since the 1940s, cumbia would spread to other Latin American scenes. Eventually, cumbia would fall from its pinnacle as the most popular music in Colombia, replaced mostly by foreign genres and the Colombian folk music known as vallenato. However, cumbia scenes outside of Colombia would then take the music and run with it. Enter Peru. The Andean nation would actually play a pretty big role in cumbia's rise. Peru quickly took cumbia and altered it, creating its own subgenre. This would include innovations on the Colombian formula, such as, come the 1960s, the use of the electric guitar and a psychedelic vibe. Cumbia became so popular in Peru that it's been argued that the version known around the world is a result of cumbia being exported from Colombia to Peru, then re-exported from Peru to the world at large. Another nation that took cumbia on wholeheartedly was Mexico, where the music is present in both pop culture and the underground. Although the music first arrived in Mexico City in the 1950s, the capital of cumbia in Mexico is the city of Monterrey in the north of the country. Legendary figures in the city's cumbia culture include Celso Piña, an early Mexican cumbia musician who remains highly venerated today, and Gabriel Dueñez, a type of cumbia DJ known as a sonidero, who pioneered a subgenre known as cumbia rebajada. Cumbia rebajada was born at a party that saw Dueñez's turntable essentially break, making the cumbia records he played slow down greatly. But instead of seeing it just as an equipment malfunction, Dueñez liked the sound, which became his signature as he continued to DJ with the records playing slower than intended. This is highly reminiscent of the story of DJ Screw, Houston's legendary hip-hop producer, who is also known for slowing down tracks after an accidental discovery of the technique. Mexican cumbia, at both its normal speed and in its rebajada form, is also highly popular in the United States. A third foreign take on cumbia uses the Colombian rhythms as the basis of a sort of Latin American downtempo genre from Argentina, which I particularly dig. This music is sometimes called digital cumbia and is a slower, more hypnotic take on the rhythm that uses electronic instruments instead of accordions or percussion. This movement's genesis was the ZZK club in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and ZZK would evolve into a record label that has released a lot of great music. And yet another take on cumbia is currently evolving in New York City, which is similarly mixing the music with electronic instruments and other genres, but this time evolving from the Mexican tradition. The successful adoption of the cumbia rhythm by communities abroad shows its versatility. It is beloved by millions who enjoy it in a variety of ways. It also shows its potential to spread further, in the sense that if it has taken over the Americas, what's to say it won't conquer the world? Will we one day see cumbia in Africa, India? The music has adapted itself into local music scenes before. In any case, Cumbia is big and only getting bigger. The genre is definitely here to stay. This has been another map video. Like it if you learned something, subscribe to see more, and check the comments for corrections. Following the Other Map Patreon is the best way to stay updated on the channel, and it's free, so check that out too. Peace.